The Nigerian government has suspended duties, tariffs, and taxes on essential food items imported through land and sea borders for 150 days. This announcement was made by the Minister of Agriculture and Food Security, Abubakar Kyari, at a press briefing in Abuja on Monday. The duty-free import windows include maize, wheat, husked brown rice, and cowpeas as part of the Presidential Accelerated Stabilization and Advancement Plan to achieve food security and economic stability. Kyari emphasized government's commitment to addressing the food inflation crisis and ensuring no citizen goes hungry. The government also will import 250,000 metric tons each of wheat and maize to support small-scale processors. The federal government has also inaugurated the renewed Hope National Livestock Transformation Implementation Committee to prioritize livestock development. And to unpack this, I am joined by a public affairs analyst, Theophilus Akatugba. Good morning, glad to have you join me.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to be with you in your studios this morning.
All right. Let me start by just referencing food inflation as at now is about 40%, looking at the records we had in April 2024. How effective will this tax suspension be in achieving food security in Nigeria?
All right. First of all, when I heard of it, I was quite impressed because a few days ago or 1 or 2 weeks ago, I was on this channel and we discussed matters bordering on agriculture. And I indeed recommended that there must be a policy to encourage importation of food so that the market prices can be stabilized. You mentioned 40%, about 40% food inflation rate. The meaning is that what the government has done is to help to stabilize prices at home, even though there is the risk of being dependent on importation of food to the detriment of local production. That risk must be watched carefully while we take a look at the advantages that this policy can provide for the country.
Well, I don't mean to sound pessimistic, but are there other factors besides this import duties on food that needs to be addressed to ensure we have food supply in Nigeria?
Surely. Nigeria, there is a global food challenge, no doubt. Now, this global food challenge is hinged on conflicts. Now, conflict is a primary driver of food shortages all over the world, and in Nigeria, conflict, the insecurity situation across the country affect food production massively. The second factor that exacerbates the situation is climate change. Climate change, the manner of the weather and what we are all experiencing globally, disrupting food production and reducing level of output is another big issue, apart from other matters like economic disruption. If you look at the whole world now, the conflict, Ukraine and Russia conflict, has impacted very seriously on food supply globally. And so Nigeria needs to look at the other factors. This is just a temporary measure. You said it's for 150 days. It could be extended because that to show that the government is very much aware of the fact that this could discourage local food production, especially those in the listed items, those who have invested heavily. So the government is taking its time and doing it carefully. And if we don't do that, we might maybe roll back all the gains we have made over the years.
Well, you touched on something quite interesting, referencing conflict, insecurity, and also climate change being drivers for food insecurity in Nigeria and also beyond. But then looking within our shores in Nigeria, talking about conflict, how about internal conflicts such as the farmer herders conflict we have and also the land use disputes? How is this impacting food production in Nigeria?
Well, you just mentioned it. The farmer herders conflict, I didn't mention that. I just used the word insecurity. How could farmers produce when there are constant crises and conflicts between people who want to use the same landed asset? So it is indeed a difficult situation for any country. And so that is why conflict resolution must be at the forefront of even this agenda to improve the food supply situation in Nigeria. There are a lot of things that need to be done. First of all, the food supply chain, the food production chain has to be improved upon. You can't produce if farmers do not feel safe. But I do not want to say that gains have not been made, because if you look at the situation we are in today, it's not in comparison with where we're coming from. So more effort needs to be done so that people can feel safer to do more farming, either artisanal farming or commercial farming. There is a need for safety because farms are far removed from the cities, and so people are vulnerable if we have insurgencies and people who can walk in and bandits. It's just unfortunate that Nigeria is experiencing this, especially when food production is at the core of its government policy.
Okay, let's talk some more on this policy now. I mean, how might this policy impact domestic production of maize, wheat and rice, and also cowpeas?
Yeah. First, the policy will affect prices for the consumer in terms of stabilizing prices. Those who make food locally are going to have a sudden competition. And so if there is anywhere the food prices have been unjustly, unrealistically raised, those who make food locally will be forced to moderate the level of increments that they add or that happens occasionally. So stabilization of prices is one impact, but it will impact on local food production negatively. Why? Because you now know that you are not too sure if you find a market for what you produce. And that has an impact on someone who has invested in maize for 2024, is likely to make losses, and it might potentially move away to another crop.
Now, this story mentions recommended retail price for imported food commodities. I'm just wondering, how realistic is it for the government to enforce these recommended retail price throughout the country?
Well, it has always been a difficult thing to implement stability or same price across a country like Nigeria that is not a uniform country. It's a federating nation where there are various governmental levels. And so it's a very difficult situation. However, we are in an emergency, very difficult situation. Some measures that do not look very popular or attractive might be undertaken. However, I feel that competition is the best way to stabilize prices instead of recommended retail prices.
All right. I know you touched on earlier on other measures to help, encourage food production and also stem the tide of food insecurity in Nigeria. You touched on conflict, insecurity, climate change, and now we have these
economic disruptions.
Fantastic. And now we have tax suspensions. Now, beyond all of these other measures, what else can the government look at to ensure we have food security in Nigeria?
Yeah, first you must look at the food production chain. Subsidies must be introduced to help farmers produce at the best cost. The government must also find a way to find a banking system that will guarantee a farmer revenue flow while his crops gestate or mature. That aspect is lacking because I have seen that play out in a small community in Ghana. A friend of mine became a traditional ruler. He noticed that the farmers in that community, they were selling off their goods before they mature at ridiculous prices. And so he raised some money and stabilized the life of those farmers. And the yield at the end of that period was really, really fantastic. And they have sustained that continually till this day because the farmers were no longer miserable. So farmers need to be stabilized. Their economy needs to be stabilized. They should be able to pay their children's fees, live a reasonable good life. And Nigeria also must do something about rural-urban migration because lives have become completely hopeless in the rural areas. And so people are migrating to the cities looking for white-collar jobs that do not exist. So if government can improve conditions in our rural areas, having access to healthcare, to electricity, and all the amenities that make life meaningful, there will be a reverse in rural-urban to urban-rural migration. And this will inure to higher food production because farming becomes close to the people, and that's the easiest thing a lot of them will undertake.
And that's a fine place to leave it. Indeed, we hope we get a lasting solution to end food insecurity in Nigeria. Thank you so much for your time and your company, of course. Theophilus Akatugba, Public Affairs Analyst, many thanks for your kind company.
Thank you very much. Pleasure being here.